I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Welcome to Politely Pushy. I'm your host, as always, Eric Chemi. Today, I'm joined by Mary Kay Pratt, freelance journalist, but you've worked with CIO, CSO, Tech Target, Wall Street Journal, MIT Technology Review, Enterprise IT, all the big things that so many major companies are involved with. It's the world right now. I feel like Enterprise IT is taking over the world, whether that's AI or all the aspects to it. So, Mary, thanks so much for joining me here today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You know, I was trying to research you ahead of time, but there's not a lot about you on social media. You tend to be private. I appreciate that. I deleted my Twitter account. I never use my Facebook account. I understand that idea of I want to write and I have my work public, but I don't want to be public. So tell me about how you've got to that point of my work is public, but not me.
Well, I came from old school newspapers. So back before actually the internet, which I'm a little bit embarrassed to talk about that I've been in this industry that many decades. But coming in as a traditional journalist, the standard, it's my phone ringing, sorry. I still have an old landline in an old house.
I love it. It's like before the internet, we had a landline ringing, but this is real. I like that you can't even go 1 minute into a conversation. Your phone's already off the hook.
Well, usually it doesn't, but it's an old house with old wiring and we don't want to knock down the walls and start feeling with the wiring. So that's a whole other story. But anyways, I'm an old school journalist and the standard was really to be maintain that veneer of objectivity, really to have no public opinion about the events and the issues that are being covered, which I've always adhered to. And I like to think that, of course, I'm a thinking individual and I can look at the news and understand the news, but I never take any of that to my job. I am, and including in IT and cybersecurity, which doesn't have, say, the political bent of covering any sort of hard news did when I was back in the newspapers. But keeping off those social media platforms just allows me to really come to every interview, every topic that I cover with this kind of clean slate about tell me the sources I'm interviewing, tell me your ideas, your insights, your information, and really listen to what's being said to formulate the article that I'm trying to craft. And I think not coming with any sort of baggage puts the people I'm interviewing at ease because they don't think I'm coming with an agenda or that I'm coming from my own personal positions. And I think it helps just create much more effective interviews, much more effective dialogue, and just keeps me really open to the topics I'm covering. As I mentioned, that's really important, not only for my existing work, which I still do, and I'm keeping really busy with all that, but as I launch a community newspaper in my hometown, which has become a news desert, it really helps build that trust among my community members to say, hey, we want to bring news back to our city and we don't have an agenda. We're non-advocatory, we're nonpartisan. We just want to know what's going on and what people think. And so I really keep that low profile. I'm also a little weary about all the data being gathered on me, but that's again, a whole other conversation we can have.
I understand. I think about the same things, but I'm curious then on the social media, because I know there's a lot of people, having worked in newsrooms myself, where they're saying, hey, you got to build up your following, you got to build up this. And I wonder from your perspective, being freelance and you're pitching yourself to different outlets, did you ever feel that, hey, I need to have a bigger following, a bigger presence, because they're looking to me and they're measuring me based on clicks. And I know a lot of reporters who feel like their following count matters more than even the quality of the work that they're doing.
Yeah, that's a hard balance. And, is it possible I'm losing out on something? Maybe. My feeling has always been it's really about the work I produce. As I said to you earlier, before I get going, I keep a low profile deliberately because I want the work, the quality of the work to speak for itself. And I think quality still attracts clicks, right? It still attracts people who stay through the whole story, who don't just jump in and say, this doesn't work, this doesn't answer my questions, this doesn't inform me. So even if someone has a huge following, if it really doesn't deliver the quality, I think that kind of dings them in the long run. I'm sure there are people who do both really well, who build their following and produce quality. There's probably a lot of merit I could learn from that work, but I find that I'm so busy doing my job and doing it the way I want to do it that there's not a lot of time left over to do that additional work. Maybe down the line, but I do like to. I do prefer kind of a lower profile. By choice as much as personal choice, by as much as professional objectives.
Do you have hidden lurker accounts where you can go and look at things? Is your issue about the looking of what's on social media or or are you publicizing your opinions on social media, or is it both?
Neither. And I think first off, I've been really steady with my work, so I don't feel like I have to chase a lot of work. So that probably helps. I was well established coming into freelance and have been doing it for more than 2 decades. So I don't have that pressure perhaps to chase work. If that changes, maybe again, my approach to this has to change. In terms of finding things on social media, I think so much of it has just become noise. Not all of it. And I am on LinkedIn. So that seems to be for work a much more, I don't want to say curated experience, but maybe a little bit more curated, where it tends to be much more in line with the kind of topics I'm covering. So I'm able to see things there. I find some of the other platforms, without going too far down that rabbit hole, so much of it is noise that it becomes an ineffective use of my time. And my time is very precious, as is everybody's. When I interview people, I always thank them for their time. Everyone is very busy. So for me to start digging into too much social media, it's just how I choose not to spend my time. I can usually find dialogue, conversations, and the information I need through much more effective channels. Do I lose out on part of the dialogue? Absolutely. But the big issues bubbling up in those social media platforms tend to make the news. So I can usually find out those big items through more traditional news channels and screen out the other news that is just distraction for me.
Well, I'll say it now then. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. In case I forget later, thank you for spending time knowing you're busy. Tell me like you said, doing freelance for a couple of decades, why did you go that route as opposed to, hey, I'm going to try to get the full-time newsroom job at one particular outlet?
Yeah, it's just completely personal. I did work full time for many years and worked at a number of newsrooms and had fabulous experience. Loved covering the news. And for me, my journey was absolutely around family. I have 4 children, so when I first started having children, freelance fit better with our schedule. I've been in newsrooms when big news happened, and it's all hands on deck. It's all hours. And I found that it wasn't really going to be conducive to be the kind of parent I wanted to be, but I still loved the work. So freelance, I was an early adopter of at-home work. I've been working at home since 2000. And there's pros and cons. I always told people over the decades, there are definitely pros and cons to working remotely and working at a home office. But it allowed me a lot more flexibility. Much of that has become more standard in the workplace at this point, but back in 2000, it was not the norm to be able to craft one's own schedule, to pick the hours that I wanted to work, those kind of things. So for me, it was that. And I came from straight news. I had done some business reporting. I've done a lot of different beats. So around 2000, I went into business reporting. That was, as many people remember, the .com and then the .com bust, boom and bust, right? So I started covering information technology, just part of the business reporting I was doing. And that whole IT space exploded at that point. So I started doing more and more of that and just found it really engaging and interesting, and it was evolving. There was always new dynamics and a lot to learn and say. So I just kind of started following down that route, and that's where I've been and added cyber over the years. They go hand in glove. So I've been covering that, but I still do other kind of reporting every now and then, which is fun. And in fact, speaking with a young reporter the other day, we talked about how the best part of the job is you're always learning. You always meet people. I've met some great people over the years, and you learn almost every single day. There's something new to hear, something new to learn in any place you're working, even long time, even covering a beat this long. Every day I learn another dynamic, another piece of the puzzle.
I like that. I like that story. So what are you learning right now? Enterprise IT, cybersecurity management. What's your current exciting thing that you want to pursue more of?
Oh, boy, that's a hard one. I'm intrigued by the whole AI issue. And there's so much there. So I'm trying to gather
the whole
my
buzzword
thoughts.
thing. I was like, how long are we going to go without talking about AI? But it wasn't too long.
Oh, no. I am excited and by the possibilities of AI. I think there's a lot of areas around AI that are incredibly important for society. And this is where I'm going to bridge a little bit and talk about my personal opinions, which again, I don't usually do. Things about its ability to solve these, intractable problems, these unsolvable problems around like medicine and healthcare and precision medicine and environmental issues and all sorts of important areas. There's just so many good things AI can do. We also know that there are some things that we are cognizant that maybe we don't want to go down those roads. I think what I'm curious about is when I hear people, mostly friends and people I know outside of work, voice concern or fear about AI, not just about job loss. I think that's a legitimate fear. I'm not as worried about it because I think it's like the tractor, right? Like we used to have a lot of people dig ditches. Now, then we got the tractor and other people moved on to different types of jobs. I think that will happen when maybe work less hours a week, which I think everybody would love. I think when people talk about the fear of AI, the sense of being tracked or all these kind of things that they feel are a little bit creepy, what I'm intrigued by is a sense of they seem to give up a lot of control, where at the end of the day, I don't think it's sentient. If it ever gets that way, we unplug the computers. I don't know. But the sense that too often people give up their control of technology, right? Like they say, I'm addicted to the phone. I'm like, then put it down, shut it off, go to a flip phone. You don't want to be on, a social media platform all day, then okay, then don't. I think too often, which again, I'm not on social media. And there were other reasons, going kind of a little detour. I kind of fell into the rabbit hole a little bit with Facebook early adopter, where it was easy to feel a little snarky sometimes about posts. And I'm like, that's not who I am and that's not who I want to be. So I got off of it. I think with AI, we too often give up, or we come with a sense of we don't have as humans the control of it, where at the end of the day, it is a tool we created and it is a tool we can control if we see it and choose to use it that way. But that's a little bit out of the scope of what I write about. I write more about the governance of it. So these are dynamics within the governance of it. But I think there are larger societal issues that we're going to be tackling. I find that fascinating, even if I'm not necessarily leading the conversation around that.
And then you mentioned starting a community newspaper. That feels very, very different from global IT. What's going on there?
Well, like most of many communities, we had a newspaper. We had a really good newspaper. It was a daily, then it went weekly, then it was digital only, and then it kind of disappeared. And for my community, which is, it's a vibrant community, there's a lot going on. I felt the loss personally as a resident, felt it. And there were a couple things that really made me drive toward this. One was our big football field, which is where our 4th of July fireworks are held, was torn up one day. I went by and it's literally torn up and there's tractors. And I'm like, I don't know if they're building a skyscraper or what they're doing. Like there was no news about it. I couldn't find anything. Local elections, I couldn't get any information about the candidates. It was actually a local college, had reporting on the local candidates. And then a really cute pizzeria in my city had a new bakery open up next to it. And I'm like, well, I would love to know about a new bakery coming into town. And I thought, I had been waiting for someone else to take up that torch and start a newspaper. And when no one did, I thought, I can do this and I will do this. So I made some noise, networked. Anyone who came to my door, like the candidates who were running for office, colleagues and contacts I had in the office or in my city, I just said, hey, I want to do this. I don't want to do it alone. I can't do it full time. And through that networking, got in touch with another woman who was looking for this kind of opportunity, and I and a third formed a nonprofit to work as a publishing agency and or the publishing entity, and we are building it. So we have a website. We're moving it forward. We're hiring staff, raising capital, doing all those kind of good things. So yeah, we're moving forward, but not really ready to say too much more than that it's in the works.
Okay, and then
part-time at night. This is what I do on my off hours instead of
your nighttime time. Yeah. You said you're in a position now where you're busy enough work-wise. You're not having to chase work in terms of the regular freelance IT stuff that you're doing. What is the process then that you're doing stories? Are you pitching to editors at outlets saying, hey, I've got this story. Do you want it? Are they coming to you and assigning you stories? Or who's creating the stories and what work is the flow going?
It's a combination, but most of them at this point are assignments, which is great. But I always have a list of ideas and sources and such. So, but most of them come to me now. I have long-term relationships with all my editors. The publications for which I write have been in place for a long time. So that helps. And I treat, and there's not a lot. I write for, essentially mainly 2 entities right now. Yeah, so they come to me with stories, but they're always in my space. Some of them are expanding out, like I'm doing more around sustainability reporting. Back when it was just IT and cybersecurity, it was much more narrow. But like as the fields grew, as organizations expanded what they could do with digital technologies, so did my reporting. So I do a lot around data, sustainability. Sometimes it's very industry specific. Sometimes, which helps because I have this business background, I can speak different languages of different sectors. So they come to me and they keep me busy and they're great. I work for great people. It's one of the best things about my job is the people for whom I work. They keep me busy and that's great. I'm happy to have it.
So, obviously we hear from companies who say, hey, I want to get published. I want someone to talk about me or get this article. What should they even do? How do they even get in front of someone like you? Because most people I know, and most people, when I was writing, I didn't really take pitches, right? I looked at them, I saw them, okay, maybe it gives me an idea and I go in a different direction, but I didn't really take the pitch. But then sometimes, like 1 out of 1,000 times, maybe I did. So there was no rhyme or reason to say, well, this is the one that I did and why. So what is your working relationship or typical usage of companies who reach out to you to say, hey, can you include us or write about us?
Yeah. I do get a lot of pitches, some of which are just completely irrelevant to my work. I'm trying to think of some of the ones.
Everybody says that.
It's just one of those. I don't know. You get on these PR lists or I don't know, distributions, and I get things that are just, and I did read a book and I can't remember which one it was about email, and it said. It's like somebody, so I say this because I don't respond to emails that are completely irrelevant to me anymore, or many of the ones that I get that might be relevant to me. I don't, because it's the equivalent was if someone keeps knocking at your front door and you're trying to work, you just can't open the door all the time. So I don't do that. If I get a couple of emails from someone, I might just send a note back saying, I'm not going to follow up. I'll respond if it's relevant to me. That's just a time management issue. I don't try to be rude. I usually keep all the pitches that are relevant for me. I have a way of filing away ideas, people who I think might be relevant expert sources for my work. And if they come from an external PR person, if it comes from the person themselves, or if it comes from an internal PR person, or sometimes, I have good relationships with professional organizations that represent the type of experts I'd use, such as CIOs and CSOs and chief data officers and the like. So I have a way to, it works for me. I don't know if anyone else could use my filing system, but it works for me. I have a way to keep all of these on file. And it is like you said, sometimes there's a little kernel in a pitch that is relevant, or it's an expertise. Say a CIO is doing environment or sustainability initiatives, whatever, maybe looking at how their AI deployments are using energy, because we know AI is really energy intensive. So I'll file that away as someone who can talk about this dynamic. And then when those assignments roll around, or when I need a pitch related to these areas, I can draw on them to craft the story, to line up interviews and the like. So that's how I do a lot of my finding sources, finding ideas, knowing what's in the, what people are talking about, knowing what's, kind of going through people's heads. I also look at a lot of newsletters, conference schedules, and people who refer me to other people. I have great sources who say, this person is doing this really interesting work, or this person can speak to you, or the like. So it comes to me through a variety of sources. I think for people who really want to be seen as expert sources, PR people are really helpful, and I work well with them. I know they have the job and I have my job, and sometimes it can be a little bit of odds, but it's a very symbiotic relationship. So I do think PR people are very helpful for expert sources who are looking for these opportunities to work as a liaison. I work with these people a lot, and they're great at finding things. I think what's hard is when I need sources, and sometimes the expert sources want to speak, but they're too narrow in what they're willing to speak about. Like they have this one thing, and I really need to speak about like a broader issue. It doesn't really work. Sometimes that's a challenge.
Give me an example on that. Like let's drill down a little bit more on that.
Sure.
On that narrowness thing.
So if, say, for example, and this is just a hypothetical, perhaps I'm doing an interview or I'm working on a story about customer experience, and very broadly, and someone only wants to speak about a really narrow piece of it, that might be fine. It might fit in as one anecdote for the story. But if you're going to be so focused, or not willing to talk, say you're only willing to talk about how great it's worked out for you, but not willing to talk about the bumps to get there, that's not really effective for me, right? Like I can't just tell the shiny happy story, because that's not really helpful for me. When I position my stories, it's always about, I talk about it advancing the conversation, right? It's not going to be, people write whole books on these topics. I always say it's one article, it's one piece of the puzzle, it's advancing the conversation. And to just showcase how great it worked for you as an organization, as a CIO or CSO or whatever it might be, doesn't advance the conversation. It's too promotional. I need to show a little bit of the downsides or the challenges and how you overcame them, because that's what our readers want to know, is like, I have these challenges too. I'm trying to get over them. How did you overcome them? And what was the benefit? They're not willing to talk a lot about that piece of it. Just telling the good part of the story doesn't really work as well for me. And it might end up in the story, but it's really ends up being less pronounced. Their expertise gets kind of buried further down the list because they're not willing to tell the whole story. Whether it's on, like I said, customer experience or data analytics or implementing AI or whatever it might be. People need to be a little bit more forthcoming. And it helps because business publications there's no kind of gotcha journalism. It really is this staid kind of, I don't want to say conservative in that kind of political sense, but conservative in the sense of it's not inflammatory. It's not clickbait kind of stuff. So it really is positioned in a way that helps others learn from people's experiences, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. How much do you get pressure from vendors or competitors saying, "Oh, well, you wrote about them, but you didn't write about us, or our features are better"? And I know you said it's not gotcha journalism, it's not clickbait,
Yeah.
but I find, at least in my experience, there is enough pressure of, well, you wrote about a competitor, or you didn't put this particular thing in your story, or you left this out, and some people feel like it might be gotcha journalism. Other people may feel like it's clickbait.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't get a lot of that, which helps. Vendors, I don't do a lot of vendor reviews. I don't do vendor products. So that takes a little bit of pressure. Occasionally I've done, for some publications, like I might cite a particular vendor as an example in a story.
Right,
And
that's what I meant. More like you cite a vendor, but then their competitor, or you're writing about a story and you quote an executive from one company, but their competitor is like, well, you shouldn't have talked to them. You should have talked to us instead, because we're better than that.
Yeah. It's usually, I can usually say why I cited something. Like if it's an example of, say, a leading, I can point to like an analyst firm said, these are the 3 leading vendors in this space. So I have a little bit of cover to say, you're not one of them. So I'm not giving all the list. It wasn't meant to be a list. It's not a review. And part of it, I think, is a little bit having come from the reporting background. It's very easy to just be like, sorry, like, I don't work for you. That was one of my favorite lines from a working journalist, really, again, old school newsroom journalist, when you get those complaints, and, I knew this person who, his attitude was, he listened for 2 minutes. He's like, guess what? I don't work for you. I don't work for you. I try not to be blunt, but I kind of say it in a more polite way. I'm like, it really wasn't, it's not an ad. And if you want to get take out an ad. This is not what my job is. It's not what my role is. And it's fair. And sometimes I'll say, look, I'll keep you on file. And if you have a great story, if your client has a great story to tell, if you have a CIO who wants to talk about how inventive your product is and how they solve real business problems that only they could do, like, pitch that to me, but don't just tell me you want to get your name in the paper, because, again, buy an ad. So yeah, that's a little bit of the old school journalism coming through, right?
No, I agree, because I'm always saying, if you want to do an ad, then buy an ad, because too many companies come with ad speak and think they're going to get a story of their ad speak. And I said, a story has the drama. It's like you said, what are the challenges? Like an actual story would have, the protagonist and the antagonist and the challenges and the drama and the climax and the resolution. That's still a story, right? Whether it's in business or not. And a lot of companies just want to give a feature sheet or a fact list.
Yeah. And like I said, most of my work doesn't have a lot of that. So it's shielded me a little bit from that. I'm sure my editors probably get it more than I do. So again, I work for great people. They might take a little bit more heat than I do.
Do you feel like your editors are ever getting pitched and then they're assigning you a story that they were pitched on?
No. I mean, I'm sure they do, but I never find it's like a vendor speak. Like if they do get that, it's so filtered, and it really is. And again, my space is very much on the enterprise. So it's an enterprise business problems. And a lot of the dialogue around CIOs and CSOs is around that. Like, don't talk to me. Don't be enamored with the technology. Don't talk about tech for tech's sake. What is the business for? What is the objective? So it helps that whole space has moved to that dialogue. So if my editors are getting pitches from any vendors and I don't have that visibility, they've never shared that with me, by the time that kind of assignment gets crafted and I'm working on it, it's usually around like, what is this business dynamic? And they generally say, we don't want vendors. I'm not generally I don't want to say barred, but we're not interviewing vendor executives for these stories. It's really those CIOs and CSOs and analysts and researchers and the like. So again, it shields me a little bit from it. That all being said, I think for my role, I still have to know what the vendor community is doing. I have to know about their advances. And often when I do get vendor information, it's really helpful for my job. I'm not sure it's helpful for them in terms of getting promotions, but all those studies vendors do and letting me know about their product advances help me do stories that say, hey, this new solution is now coming onto the market. This class of technology is evolving in this way, and it is allowing CIOs and CSOs to seize upon it. I think the people I write for, right, they're all executives. They're all very smart. They're business people. They can read about these kind of things and then go investigate these products themselves. So in some ways, I guess the vendor community is benefiting from that. But by name, probably not. But all that information that comes to me is helpful in terms of keeping pace with everything that's going on. And as you know, it changes so quickly these days. It's critical to keep on top of all those advances. So you can do the job well, talk to these executives about what's available and how they're using it.
Do you ever get assigned a story that you think, I really don't want to do this. This sounds very annoying.
On very rare occasion, and there have been a few that I've turned down, not often. And there's a couple that I've shied away from. Some of those lists of products, which again, we don't do very often. And it's always meant to be informative, but I don't do those because I don't feel that. I feel like I can't. Picking and choosing which ones to highlight feels beyond my scope of expertise. So, and there's one other story. I think I said, there was one other story that was particularly technical. It's been I took coding. I could never code. Maybe the low code platforms I could use. There was one or two that were particularly technical, and I said, I don't think this is the right one for me. I couldn't do the job well. And I told my editor that. And it's again, an editor I worked with a long time. And I said, hey, look, if you're really jammed up, if nobody else can take this on, I'm sure I could make it work. But I think it'd be better served with someone who is a little bit more technically astute in this particular area, who can have the conversation better than I.
Speaking of which, I'm going to ask you a question. You don't have to answer it.
I say that to people sometimes too.
but what's the business model here as a freelance? If you turn it down, you're not getting paid. Are you getting paid per article? Do you get paid per word? Is it a flat fee? Do you get paid more for more experience? But they're trying to keep costs down. Like I've worked in newsrooms. I'm in a business report. So I'm just curious, having never been a freelance journalist. So what is the model here and how do you best sustain yourself?
I think my editors are very good and I feel very fairly compensated. And that helps. I have in my experience, and I've been doing this for 24 years, so I can speak for those I've turned down would be a better one. When 2001 rolled around, and I remember when everyone was putting up websites, right? The high-speed internet, everyone needed websites. And I remember getting pitches, and some people were, paying very well. And some people actually put in their ads for freelancers or their pitches to have me work for them. Your pay is your published byline, and like that's insulting.
So your pay is nothing, basically.
Nothing, right? I'm just like, that's just insulting. I think that goes to larger issues around work. I don't think people should work for free. My kids are entering the internship phase, and they thankfully get college credits. I remember in my college, I think you had to pay the college for the credit, and then you went and worked for free, which seemed at a BU at those price tags seemed a little bit ludicrous. I think people should be fairly compensated, and what that fairly means, I'm sure, is judged on experience and a lot of other things. Like I said, I have these really long-term relationships, and I would like to think it's because I provide value and I'm a good employee. I will put a plug in for my daughter. She's a super good employee. I see it in her. She works at should I say, she works at Starbucks and gets up for like a 4 a.m. shift and has for years, putting her, helping to pay her fund money through college.
What does she think about this new CEO?
Oh, I don't know. I think that's above her pay grade. But I think if one works hard, it does good work. And I say this around journalism, right? I think it has a reputation of being something it's not. I think there are a lot of good opportunities. It's never going to be, Fortune 500 CEO pay. There's no secret to that. But it's been a good career. I mean, I would speak it up any day. I learn a lot. I've met some fabulous people. I've done some really interesting things. I rode an elephant in a circus. Now we know not to ride elephants in circuses, but I did that as a news reporter. I'm sure I covered some other things. Country fairs, that was fun. That was some fun assignments. I did a magazine report once where I was pitching it about the proliferation of day spas when they were really starting to build up. I said, well, maybe we can do a feature. And my editor said, it would be better if we actually pay for you to go do that. And I was like, okay. So, I'm like, who argues with that kind of experience? So it's a good field. And professionally, it's been a great career. I can't complain about any of it.
Your bio says on the, I think it's the Tech Target page, ranging from community news to fashion to health and fitness. What were you doing? What were you doing in fashion?
I love fashion. So, as a community newspaper, I was on the features pages, and I forget how it came about. I don't know if my editor asked me to start writing it or I pitched an idea, but I had a weekly fashion column, and it got picked up by the AP a lot, or some, kind of ran in multiple places. I was working for a bigger chain back then. It no longer exists. So it would run. So I wrote this weekly fashion column. And as I moved from that newspaper to a bigger one in the South, and I worked on their actual wire desk, I had an opportunity to do some fashion writing for them as well. And then when I started freelancing, Women's Wear Daily needed a reporter to cover a local Chanel show. So I was like, yeah, they called me and they said, can you do it? And I was like, yeah, I can do it. So it's fun. It was great. And I think as a writer, I will say, one of the things I think it helped me as a writer do is to have more fun with my work and to bring a little bit more of my voice to the work, to have more flair in my writing. I mean, I'm not I don't think I'm a verbose writer. I don't think I'm over the top in my voice or anything like that. But covering fashion allowed me to loosen up a little bit, go away from that straight news reporting or business reporting to add some color and conversational tone, which I think I've carried through. But it was a great experience. There's only so much of that I wanted to do. I don't think I'd go back to it, but it was fun. And that's, like I said, that's a great thing about journalism. I always kind of have this opportunity to do something new and different and meet people in new places and the like. So I'm sure I've done some other things. They'll come to me after the call. I'm like, oh yeah, I did this other cool thing. And
well, you wrote a dozen books, it says, for school students, nonfiction.
Yeah.
What's that about? Yeah.
Well, there's, again, these opportunities come to me, which again is great. They filled in, especially when I had younger children. It seemed good. They're the kind of things you'd find in your children's elementary schools or your middle schools or high schools. And, I only picked topics that I thought that I was interested in. So one was I think elementary or middle school book on World War I. And I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. I find the topic interesting. I've always wanted to read The Guns of August. I read it for writing that book. I didn't finish Guns of August, but it was something I wanted to read. So it's kind of getting paid to do something that was interesting to me. And it was a new venture. One was parliamentary government. How does parliamentary government work? Again, kind of a middle school book. So it would be the reference book your kid comes home when they're learning about British government or something. And I had studied overseas. I'd studied in England. And had British government as one of my topics. So kind of knew a little bit about it. So that was just kind of an interesting piece to do. And when you get paid for doing something that's kind of interesting to you, it's who can argue with that? And it was different. It was kind of neat.
Getting paid to learn. That's my goal in life. If you're going to pay me to learn, then that's good.
Yeah.
This has been great, Mary. I appreciate the time. Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
thank you for being generous with us and just walking us through your experience, what you're looking at, what you're trying to not look at as well. So thank you so much, Mary.
Hope it helps.
Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.